T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Launch Sequence Podcast. I'm here with good friend Xerostate and streamer who I had an episode with a couple weeks ago. Those of you on the audio platform probably remember that. We released that as a bonus because the video file and some of the audio got messed up. But today we are back with a lot more on the plate to talk about. We are going to jump just basically straight into talking Star Citizen 4.0, but really ultimately Star Citizen as an MMO and how that's all gonna, how 4.0 kind of leads us there, what step we're taking. So thank you for joining us. This is a video and audio podcast. You can find them on all the platforms, and supporters get to come in here live. So if you do support, feel free to jump in with us on Discord. Xerostate, though, my friend, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I almost left my mic muted for a second there.
It's okay. It's okay. We could just talk to silence. That's fine.
That's right. That's right. I'm doing good. I am. Life is busy. The game is a lot of fun. Star Citizen's a lot of fun. 323 is out, so that's been an adjustment, but it's going pretty good so far, I think. And I'm good. I'll put it that way.
Good to hear it, dude. Wonderful. Are you experiencing spring yet? Is it still? I don't know where you live exactly, but weather has been
I live in
weird.
Minnesota.
How is it for you?
Minnesota,
right
US, and yesterday was 82 degrees. So 82 degrees in freedom units. So that would be like, I can't do math.
23, maybe?
23?
24?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know.
24.
Exactly.
Which was nice. But very nice temperature. It was beautiful day, sunny. So we're kind of like in this time frame, like May, June is like when things start heating up into summer. You get some cool days and cool nights in May. So it's like really good campfire time.
Okay.
So I'm hoping to get a few campfires in, I guess.
Yeah, I like a good campfire.
Mm-hmm.
We are personally in the time of year when you think it's supposed to be kind of warm and nice, and then suddenly it rains out of nowhere. We were the other day. We're in the middle of a whole move, and we were transporting our refrigerator to the other house, which was a lot to do with a normal size car. And it just started raining on us, like as we were loading it in, and it was just this miserable 3-hour ordeal. Only time it rained in like a 2-week span.
Did you just say you got a refrigerator into a car?
Yes. Well, it was a like a short pickup truck.
Oh, I was gonna say I have so many questions.
Yeah, no, we tried the car first. Did not think that was gonna work. Can confirm it did not. But yeah, it's you get a little desperate times, desperate measures.
No kidding.
I've lost your video feed.
Should I try fixing it?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna disconnect from Video Ninja for a second and then reconnect. I'll be right back.
No problem, dude. I got us on pause.
Are we back? Am I back?
You are back. Awesome.
Ooh, that's good.
Let me
that was terrifying. I feel like I was
real
lost in the ether for a second there.
Note that down when that started and when that stopped. Got Zero back from the ether at 0330. Cool.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
So the refrigerator was it was all fun. It was good. That's besides the point. Let's talk about Star Citizen, yeah?
Yeah.
So 4.0, we were not expecting, well, I guess we were kind of expecting this. It slipped my mind that we were going to get a roadmap roundup with the new patch after 323 went live, but we did. And it was kind of a confirmation that finally 4.0 is the next patch. Do you believe it?
I believe it. Yeah.
You buy it?
I've been ready for it for a long time, as far as like, because I mean, I recall the community at the very least. I don't know about the devs because my memory is that of a goldfish, but the community at the very least talking an awful lot about, is 318 the last patch? Is 317 the last patch? Is there going to be a 316? Or are we going to move to 4.0? And here we are in 323. Yeah. So I think the community is really ready for it, as long as CIG can pack enough stuff into it to call it a 4.0 patch. I think I'm really ready for it. So yeah. I'm not. I think because of how ready for it I am, I'm not that surprised by it. But if I wasn't ready for it, I'd be more surprised. Maybe that makes sense.
We've waited long enough, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But they have they ever put 4.0 on the actual release view of the roadmap? Was it like back when they did the 4 quarters? Did they put it up there? I don't remember.
I don't remember. I it rings a bell that it was up there at some point, but I don't know if it was on the quarterly one or not.
Yeah, I feel like it wasn't on the quarterly one. They've gotten a lot better at understanding when updates are going to come since they shortened it. So if they're putting the patch up there, they must be pretty confident server meshing will be in a good state for the live servers by then. I wonder when we're going to get our next tests.
Yeah, I've
on the preview
actually
channel.
that's a great conversation, because when they did the server meshing tests on the tech preview channel, I joined into a couple of them, and a lot of people obviously did. And I think pretty unanimously people were like, this works. This is working.
Yeah.
The fact, and there were a couple times where it was like, okay, you could obviously tell when you're switching servers. There was a couple of times where I was in a PU environment with 250, 300 other people on various servers. I mean, that's heavy, right? And I would cross the boundary, and the only way that you knew you crossed the boundary between server, what are they called? Server workers, was you would see it in the little display info in the upper right corner of your screen.
Yeah.
That you were on a different shard ID or whatever. And it was like, that's pretty impressive, That's pretty cool. So
And
if it could be working that well 3 months ago or whenever that test was, time flies. By the time 4.0 comes out, maybe we'll have something that's, smooth all the time. That'd be great,
Yeah. Yeah, that was 3 months ago, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
I hope that they start getting tests in Evocati soon. Like I would feel comfortable, a lot more comfortable with 4.0 coming in Q3 if we were seeing Evocati tests by June. Because
Yeah,
I feel like it's going to be months of testing.
Yeah, I think they really want to push for targeted tests with this kind of thing, which is kind of like the tech preview is just kind of a throw it at the wall and see what sticks kind of test.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to want to test some of the really specific stuff. They talked a little bit about the things that they want to push through, like the mission system doesn't work really with server meshing yet. So they're going to have to target that. They're going to have to target maybe how respawn works or how PvP works across it or whatever, right? So these kinds of tests are things that some of these things they can put in a box and say, this is specifically what we want you, Evocati, to test, today. So log in, we're going to create a 2 server space or whatever, right? A 2 shard space. And we want you to take missions between the two or whatever, right? So they can target some of these things and get some really targeted feedback and targeted testing, I think, on some of these things that they need to get working, which is good. That's a good thing. So.
Like on the roadmap roundup, it says that they've got the mission and the transit reworks for server meshing. They could just like load in half of Loreville, force everyone to spawn there, and be like, okay, guys, for the next 4 hours, just ride the train back and forth. We want to see if y'all fall through the
I wonder if they could do that with, probably not, but they might be able to do that in-house with clients too, because you can just, sort of, some of your office PCs to be running like Star Citizen clients and put them on the tram and just kind of watch what happens.
They've got that.
Luckily, there's a lot of focusing tests they could do with that.
They've got that cloud test launcher now, where they can just simulate the players doing the stuff. That seems like perfect for that.
Yeah, I hope it actually does. Yeah, I know that sounds like doom and gloom, but like every time that there's like internal dev testing, it's always like, this never puts the servers under the same strain. It works.
Yeah.
It works in our testing. It's always kind of like that. That happens a lot. So hopefully it's pretty robust, I guess. But.
I would guess no matter what, it'll always be broken when we get it.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like 3.18. Like we were worried about 3.23 and 3.23.1, but 3.23 being like the next 3.18 because it's a really popular patch. There's a lot of people playing, and with 3.18. We destroyed the login servers. Like we took them down.
Yeah.
And it was, I'm glad they learned from it, but there was a lot of talk about like, is 3.23 going to be the next 3.18 with like, is 4.0 going to be the next 3.18?
Right. Well, I'm glad that we get to have all these things happen in real time instead of waiting 6 years for this game to release and then it's broken at the end. And like you just, because I can't tell you what's better. I don't know. But some of these games that I get really hyped for, like Cyberpunk, would come out and it would suck. And I feel like if it was done the same way where people could see it and play these parts during the development and by the time you reach that go gold date, there'd be a lot more scrutiny, and a lot more reasons to tidy things up. And maybe Star Citizen doesn't release bug free. Maybe it doesn't even release stable, but I'm at least glad that we get to rage about it a little bit now so that we can see them fixing it in real time.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's people like, I shouldn't say like me, because I kind of like this development style too in its own way, but there's people that are super interested in seeing how the sausage is made, and there's other people that just want to eat it. You know what I mean? And they don't care. And if they saw how the sausage was made, they just get frustrated watching it. Which is, you see people that are like the roadmap watchers or whatever, right? Like, it's like they watch the game's development so they can get upset by it. And then there's other people who are like, I'm just going to play the game and see what happens, And I think I'm somewhere in the middle. Sometimes it frustrates me seeing how the sausage is made, so to speak. And sometimes it's really cool to see that at the same time.
There's definitely watching the game for the development and then watching the game for the current gameplay. And both of those approaches will make you have some really good times and some really big disappointments.
Yeah. I mean, I really just watch the development so I can maul on Spectrum about every little thing.
And come on here and talk it.
Yeah.
But seriously, if you don't watch the development and only play the game, I can imagine how disappointing the game would seem, because there's so many things that are just kind of halfway done. Like, you wouldn't even understand what these gear banks are around all the cities in 323. You'd be like, why the heck are there all these kiosks? They put these kiosks in the game and they don't even work. This place is trash. It's a scam. And it's like, well, no, that's
to be fair, kiosks being the game that don't work is nothing new.
True.
But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, like, it can be frustrating in its own way, but it's like, that meme where it's like there's like a farmer and he's like, it ain't much, but it's honest work. Sometimes it kind of feels like that when you're just playing the game to play the game. It's like, I don't really care what the kiosks are for. Like, whatever that is, that'll be cool someday, and I just go and do my thing. There's a lot of players that play that way, and there's, I think a lot of people forget that because we get all caught up in, like, the Spectrum conversations and talking about, the new medical changes and talking and be like all the drama. We get caught up in all of the news and the YouTube videos and the hype and the, the new ship sales. Dude. And then there's people who literally, like, they just play the game to figure out the game and play it, and that's pretty cool. They don't have, like, I think a good example of this is, like, Summit has been kind of, at this point, has been playing Star Citizen for a little while. And he gets into the game, and this is one of the reasons why I think he's one of the better, like, big YouTube, or not YouTubers, better big, like, Twitch streamers, is because he just gets into the game. He doesn't really care too much about the politics. He doesn't care too much about the development. He just goes, what's this about? Let's play it. Let's have some fun, and see what we can squeeze out of it, which is pretty cool. I like that. Sometimes I like that mentality. It's simpler.
There's a lot that you can do in this game.
And I think he has more fun.
There's a lot you can do in this game that's unique. It'll get old over time because there's not a lot of content.
Oh, yeah.
But the actual things you can do are definitely worth checking out if you like the type of game that it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the type of game it aims to be is what we came on the show for today. You have played a lot of MMOs before coming to Star Citizen, right? What kind of games were you playing?
I dove pretty deep into, like, New World when I was younger. I dove really deep into World of Warcraft, Black Desert Online for a little while. Man, I even played, like, the Dungeons and Dragons online game, Lord of the Rings Online. So I've dove into a few, and I've always liked the MMO style. It has this good MMOs, in my opinion, have this really good, like, balance between, you can just go out and chill and, like, go mining or whatever you want to do. And then if you want to get into something that's a lot more technical, like raiding or, like, gear enhancements and all this kind of stuff, you can go that route too. So it really depends on how you want to play that day. You want to play with other people, you want to play by solo. It gives you that space to be, sandbox isn't the right word, but, like, to, like, have your own sandbox of, like, I want to play this way today, so that's what I'm going to do. And I've always liked that about the choice with a good MMO, you know.
So you're a lot more. Well, I won't say that. Would you say that you are more about the sandbox than I guess what people call kind of theme park style MMO?
Yeah, I think I want to build something. You know, when I play a game, I like progression, I like persistence, I like the a good example is like, okay, PUBG, right? I had fun with PUBG for a little while, especially when I was playing with friends, but I would load into PUBG, you play a match, win, lose, whatever it might be, and then you go back to the main menu and the same thing happens over and over and over and over and over, right? That kind of game gets so boring to me so fast. I like story, I like persistence, I like being able to tell a story with my own gameplay and just have my own choices and build something, you know. Like today I didn't do anything of note in World of Warcraft, but I got myself a big stack of 60 iron or whatever, right? That I'm going to use to do some, and I can come back tomorrow and use that stack of iron,
Yeah.
So I think that kind of stuff is how I like to play games. It's the kind of games that I prefer.
Okay. What would you say is the most? So I'm kind of gonna split the gap here. Because I'm gonna ask about Star Citizen as an MMO and really its unique nature as an MMO. But what would you say if you can see which MMO currently in the market feels like it's kind of mimicking what something Star Citizen is going for?
That's a tough one. That's a really tough one. I mean, you obviously think about other space games first.
Yeah.
You start thinking about like Elite Dangerous and some of the similarities. There's a ton of differences with that, obviously. But, in some ways Elite Dangerous, in some ways EVE Online. I know though they have been around longer than Star Citizen, so it's kind of vice versa. But in some ways, I mean, obviously because you're in space, you're in a spaceship, so it's that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
the similarities with a lot of MMOs right now, with the game we can play right now, not with the game that we're going to play in like a year or 2 years or whatever.
Okay.
The game we play right now, the similarities mostly end. Because then you're talking about games like Tarkov or Marauders or, looter shooter games, where it's like you go out, you do things. I mean, Sea of Thieves, again, is an example that we've used before and an example that I use pretty often, where that's kind of the most similar game to Star Citizen, in my opinion, right now.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely, especially with engineering, you start to get that whole, you need to repair your ship, defend your ship, and attack other ships kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a cool style of gameplay, but as we talked about last time, you feel like that model's kind of missing for what they're actually shooting for.
Yeah, for now. I mean, like I said, there's tons of things in the future. But if your question is, what is the game that Star Citizen is most like right now? I mean, it's still Sea of Thieves, and it's going to be that way a while.
Okay. So then, what kind of game, or rather, what makes it unique as the MMO it's trying to be? Because it sounds like there's not very many comparisons.
You can create an Elite Dangerous style MMO. You can create an EVE Online style MMO. But if you're locked in a third person view of your ship, for instance, which I know EVE isn't technically, but if that's kind of what you are, and even like EVE Vanguard is this new like FPS thing. I tried a playtest of it. It's pretty cool, but it's you start on the ground. It doesn't seem to connect to the space. And same thing with Elite Dangerous with their space legs thing. The FPS content in Elite Dangerous doesn't really connect with your ship content very well. And Star Citizen, I think, really aims to bridge that gap by starting there. So their goal is to start with the player to universe interaction being the strongest interaction you have in the game. So you wake up as a person.
Yeah.
And then you run through a station to get to your ship and go do things with your ship. Rather than in Elite Dangerous, you wake up in the cockpit of your ship. Like that's how you log in.
Wake up as a spaceship.
You wake up as a spaceship, and then you can, drop to FPS, but it's like a fade to black thing. And so Star Citizen, I think the unique thing about Star Citizen is that it's really the first game really well, I think, to bridge that gap and keep persistence and progress and all that kind of stuff, to keep that all intact and also bridge that gap really well. So, and I think that's what keeps it really exciting for a lot of players. It's so unique and it's so interesting because even in the Sea of Thieves, in my opinion, Sea of Thieves like space that it's in right now, even in that place, it does bridge that gap really well. You know, yesterday I was in quantum travel, and my party member was like, "Hey, can you drop me like a med pen? I don't have a med pen." So I get out of my seat, I walk through my ship, and I drop a med pen on the ground of my, like on the floor of my ship. Here you go. And then I go back to the pilot seat and get back in quantum travel. And it's like, games don't usually, like, when you're traveling across a system or you're traveling long distances in space games or whatever, typically that's not something that you can do. Like if in Elite Dangerous, if I was in Super Cruise, you know, traveling across a system or whatever, and I could jump out of my pilot seat and walk around the bridge of my ship, it would be a totally different feeling, you know, just to be able to like interact with the space around me rather than sitting in a seat locked forward, you know, staring forward.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the most unique things to me, and one of the most draws to me is that CIG with Star Citizen really wants to bridge that pilot to player gap, you know?
Yeah. Would you say that hinges on it being an MMO? If this were a single player game, or let's say a game with maybe 9-person possible lobbies, do you think that would take a lot away from it, or is that FPS experience in ships still what overcomes and makes it the good game?
No, I mean you could make any game that has that. Actually, a pretty decent example of this is how exciting Marauders is. If you guys have ever played Marauders, it's pretty cool. You pilot a ship, and it's match based, so you'll get bored with it if you like MMOs. But you start out in a ship, and you're flying towards like a main base, whatever that base. There's different bases you can assault and like try to get gear out of. And there's other players that are also doing the same thing. I think the lobbies are like 12 ships or something. And you can get out of the pilot seat and run through your ship and get to an escape pod while you're being attacked. Like it's really cool, but it lacks the grand scheme of things like Star Citizen is planning for. So Marauders is very much not an MMO, and it very much does have that feeling of bridging that gap between piloting your ship and in FPS. And it doesn't feel like an MMO at all. So no, I don't think that this is what makes a game an MMO. Because there's a game out there that does have this, and it is not an MMO at all. And it doesn't feel like an MMO at all. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it doesn't feel like, it's just different. Yeah. So what I think Star Citizen needs to become, like really be an MMO, is totally different, you know? I see it as just system stuff, you know?
It's going back to what you said earlier about the connection you have. Like, you are waking up as a person, not a spaceship. No, you have arms and eyeballs and stuff. And that on its own, I think, is really impressive that they've managed to make what is essentially, at this point, I hate to say it, but like almost a universe sim, in the sense that it is not solely focused on space anymore. It's very much focused on your character and what they're doing, whether it's a space station, an outpost, a planet's surface. A lot of people, probably the majority of people who end up playing this game when it reaches 1.0 won't know that there was a version of this game that didn't have planetary landing.
Oh yeah, that's kind of nuts, huh? Like there was a time frame where you literally, like, I remember trying to land on Delamar, which rip Levski, but pour one out.
Miss that place, man.
You could try to land on Delamar, but your ship, like your landing gear, would just not. You would just bounce off. Like it was like it's an asteroid, because there was, there was a time when that happened, and that was crazy to think about. Like you just couldn't land. You know,
all of these moons were just pictures, just like floating in space. And the idea that they took a game that was designed around that whole philosophy and managed to shift it, keep it funded, and build out this entirely different part of the game. A lot of people would say, feature creep. And yes, 2015, big year for feature creep. They brought in landable planets. That expanded everything. But the fact that they were able to do that and make it still be what it is now, while focusing all of that sort of like monetization energy on the spaceships that, like you said, were not really mandatory to be using, is impressive. And I hope that I hope they can keep that going.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, definitely. It's a step in the right direction because to make the game unique, you have to do something that other people either aren't willing to do or haven't thought to do. And I think they've done that quite a few times. You know, when you're talking about in the early days, the Constellation was going to be one of the bigger ships that you could fly in the game. And now they're talking about flyable Krakens, you know, like, and the flyable Polaris that might be coming out this year, you know?
yeah.
That's pretty impressive stuff, you know, that it's like, this is going to be different. This is going to be a very unique situation, which is cool.
It's going to be really interesting to see how engineering are they going to be able to convince crews to work a ship how they want, you know, without forcing people to do it? Because we can see now what they had to do with combat, right? Dogfighting has to be slowed down by force because their optional things that they thought might tweak players' engagement or behavior didn't really work all those years ago.
Yeah.
So, you know, what if that doesn't work when it comes to capital ships? Getting players incentivized to go on there as a group of 6 to 10 and actually work their jobs. And CIG has to start doing things and saying, hey, the ship doesn't even work if nobody's sitting here.
Yeah. Well, and then create a space where the solo player still feels like they can have a good experience, you know? Because you can't forget the solo player. The reality of most MMOs is that most players play MMOs by themselves. Most players play PvE in MMOs. That's not me talking out my. I'm a PvP player, but for the most part, for those of you who know, and I will freely admit that. And if you don't admit that, you're stuck in a box. Like, I'm sorry, you're stuck in your own cave, and I can't help you see outside it. But the reality is that most MMO players are PvE focused. Every single time that anybody does a poll on this, even CIG, the vast majority of responses are I play PvE. You have to keep your PvE situation. You have to keep your solo experience a good one. Just like your group experience has to be a good one. So solo ships that are meaningful, solo mechanics that are meaningful, things to do as a solo player are going to be very important for CIG and Star Citizen as an MMO.
And that's hard because they're targeting so many different styles of gameplay. You now have to figure out how to make those game loops interesting to groups and to solo players. And
Yeah,
you can
absolutely.
see that with mining. That was a long time that it took them to figure that out.
I think Salvage is a good example of this. Like the Vulture is genuinely kind of enjoyable to use as a solo when it works, of course. As a solo player, you can get out there and just fly your own ship and, you know, move some boxes and make a little money and do your thing, you know. And then you move up to the Reclaimer. It's the same concept. Like you're doing the same thing on a massive scale. And it's like super enjoyable with a crew, you know. And it's like, how can you take that feeling, that Salvage gameplay, you know, solo or as a crew gives you? Because the crude version of Salvage is kind of like it augments your gameplay in a meaningful way, so it just like deepens it, but it's the same concept. So how can they do that with things like combat, and how can they do that like engineering, you know, in combat? Like how is that going to be like, you know, a solo player can have a similar experience, but if you're on a constellation with a crew with engineering and turret gunners and stuff, how does that deepen the experience, not just make you stronger? I think people talk about it in terms of strength a lot. They go, oh, a multi-crew ship is going to be stronger than a solo ship. I want it to be deeper, you know, not necessarily just stronger, you know. So, and I think that's a big part of making the game an MMO versus making it Sea of Thieves. Like, how does multi-crew deepen your experience? And how can CIG create an experience where the solo player still gets a taste of that, you know? And can have that fun. Because, like I said, the majority of players are always in MMOs going to be solo players. That's the majority of your player base are going to play the game by themselves.
Yeah, I do think that they're going to have to put a lot of effort into getting solo players to still interact with other people without grouping up with them, taking odd jobs like refueling or refining somebody else's goods, like that kind of thing. Yeah,
there's a lot to be said about like crewing up as a solo player. Like I play by myself, but this guy in his Reclaimer, right, is looking for a crewmate, you know, today. And that's, you know, the freelancer idea of just like, you know, I can go out there and just get a job with somebody for the day and have some fun. Even if it's another player, I can just be part of a crew and still feel like I'm playing by myself, but I'm playing as part of a bigger crew that's doing things. You know?
Yeah. They gotta be able to nail that.
Yeah. So how can you create the solo experience within somebody else's group experience is kind of a big thing.
Mm-hmm. VoIP, please. Make that better.
I had a successful VoIP interaction yesterday, believe it or not.
I've been hearing
Live.
reports. Yeah, it seems like it happens for some people, so that's good.
Yeah, it's definitely better in 323 and 323.1. It seems like it's most of the time on by default, which is good, you know.
I really hope we see a big update to that in 4.0, like the whole comm system. Please, because the way I see it, with server meshing, they're gonna have to figure out some kind of a new solution, at least across systems like star systems. They don't want to have people in Stanton chatting with people in Pyro for no reason, I imagine.
Yeah, the chat. That's another thing about MMOs, that different MMOs do it differently. I'll say the words Baron's chat, and some people will get triggered from World of Warcraft. If you guys don't know what Baron's chat is, look it up. There's probably an article about Baron's chat somewhere. Or like the looking for group chat that they tried for a while. But different MMOs do it differently. Some MMOs have a more global chat that like everybody on the server you can talk with, kind of thing. WoW did that for a while, kind of. Some of them are more localized. I think CIG's plan is to localize them to planets, maybe, or like have a system chat where it's like I'm in the Crusader's system, so I can talk with people in Crusader.
Yeah, that would be good.
You know, I think that would be cool, and that kind of goes in line with like CIG has talked about. They want you to feel like you can spend enough time at a planet to like kind of live there, and moving from like Hurston to Crusader or Crusader to Microtech is going to be a rare thing, because there's enough to do at each planet in a system where you want to stay there for a while, you know. So that would go in line with that, I think, pretty well, that it feels like I'm in Crusader this week, you know, and I'm going to, you know, make a big move over to Hurston. It also kind of goes in line with some of the things they've talked about with your home locations and how they want you to transport gear and stuff like that. It seems like they kind of want to create a bit of a finality to where you choose as home.
Yeah.
And keep you there for longer periods of time. That being said, they need an awful lot more depth of their gameplay before they can really lock that in. Because right now, if I wanted to stay at Crusader, I would get bored in 3 hours.
Yeah. All you've got is moons.
Yeah, exactly.
The idea of having a local voice comm for your planet system and then them kind of being like, okay, you've got at least five to probably 1 to 3 weeks maybe of content in terms of missions and sandbox activity and just things happening in a planetary system. You kind of start to recognize names, you know, the vibe of chat, you know the people in the neighborhood. That would be cool. And then you move to a new place and it's like, okay, who are these people? Who am I getting to know now?
Yeah. Well, and it brings up another point about the CIG mission system right now. You can do the exact same missions at Hurston that you can at Crusader. There's no difference. The only difference is the color of the NPCs and the guns they carry. And it takes forever to get to the bunkers at Hurston because you're in heavy atmosphere. Other than that, same thing. So how does CIG create a genuinely unique experience where it's like a bunker mission at Hurston is not the same as a bunker mission at Crusader? You know, and that would make me want to stay at one or the other for a long period of time if I wanted to do that type of mission. Right now, I can wake up at Hurston and do a bunker mission. I can wake up at Orison and do a bunker mission. And they feel exactly the same, except at Crusader, oftentimes, you know, the landscape is snowy, you know.
Yeah. It's kind of like...
And it's like, how does CIG create a space where you want to stay at one planet for a long period of time? And it matters, you know, because you like what's there.
And they have the tools a little bit. Like distribution centers, right? Cargo heavy, transportation heavy stuff. Okay, I expect those at Hurston and Microtech.
Yep.
Building interiors, put that in R-Corp. Maybe some kind of additional space stations around Crusader because they don't have a planet. But like finding an archetypal location, like they're doing the outpost, they're doing abandoned space stations, distribution centers, and then the factions, mix and match those. Give us some narrative, and there you go.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a good point you just made because CIG like are kind of creating that a little bit. So like some of the stuff that you do at Hurston, like the copium dogs, right? Where you go hunting for them in caves and stuff. Like Hurston has those caves. Microtech has those, you know, spaces where, you know, the open spaces where you find the copions. and things like that. And it's because Microtech is kind of a wild, it's Canada, right? It's it is. I think it's like the size of Canada. Microtech's like the size of Canada.
Really?
Yeah, that's
That'd be
what
funny.
I've always heard that. I don't know if that's true, but like the surface area of Microtech is kind of like the surface area of Canada, like if you
Okay,
scaled it down.
okay. Accurate
And
with
it's
maple
also
trees, or like
yeah.
Okay, that'd be
I don't know
cool.
about maple trees, but there's an awful lot of not nearly enough maple syrup in.
They need to have
Microtech.
like an in-lore kind of version of maple syrup or some kind of syrup that we can go and harvest. Like
Yeah,
a freaking
like a
IHOP
commodity at
base.
Microtech that they've
Yeah.
like a drug,
It gets
Actually, I think there
imported to
is
our
like
court by the whole E.
there's a drug or something that's like a tree sap, isn't there? I can't remember what it's called. Somebody's going to say it in the
Oh, I don't know.
podcast room chat. I bet. I think there is.
Nice. You just go up to the tree and just kind of slurp a
No,
little
well, you find it in like
syrup
a
off it.
box or a tote or whatever. It's
Okay.
like a drug. I can't remember what it's called though. I'm quite sure there is like a tree sap that gets you high. I'm assuming.
Man, I am
Good.
very, very excited to see how the drug trade expands when they bring in Pyro. Because Stanton, it's just boring when everything is illegal and everything is kind of under wraps. When they can start to industrialize it almost and build this kind of like economy around it in Pyro, I'm really, really hoping that we can see some interesting trade routes form.
Yeah, and I hope they do. That's the next part of it. There, like the reality is in this video game, there's plenty of commodities. I mean, there's like 50 different commodities. There's no reason we couldn't have trade lanes already. It's just I think CIG hasn't done it yet because that's not the part that they're focusing on yet, which is fine.
Now they are.
But we have the, I personally I don't think that we need drugs to make trade profitable, but it does make things more interesting.
Yeah.
To say like we have a special mission, but we want you to go here and get these gasping weevil eggs or whatever it is, is that there's a lot of cool ideas there, but they could do the same thing with in Pyro. Like a good example here is like they could do construction materials in Pyro, and make those a hot commodity because Pyro is all broken down and construction materials are rare, right?
Yeah.
Or tech components or AV equipment or whatever. They already have those commodities in the game, so it adds a cool space to be able to do that, kind of a Wild West style. But I've also said this kind of from the beginning of Pyro. Like I think that it's ironic. I think that Pyro will largely become the PvE system, and Stanton will stay the PvP system. And here's why: the crime stat system. If there's no crime stat, I think a lot of players won't have as much fun with being like criminals. They'll feel kind of lonely because people aren't coming after them for like bounties and stuff like that. A big part of gameplay in Stanton right now is I got a crime stat and now I'm hanging around OM1 for some bounty hunter to come after me so I can fight him. That's not going to happen in Pyro because there's no bounties. There's no crime system. I mean, maybe they'll find a way to do it, but right now it doesn't seem like there will be. So maybe there'll be some ganking in Pyro. Maybe there'll be some station control in Pyro. But I don't think it's going to hurt the PvP scene in Stanton when Pyro comes out, which is kind of interesting.
I think it's going to make PvP in Stanton better because the people who prefer to be pirates, we will undoubtedly get a lot more people who want to be just regular pirates once Pyro comes online. Most of those people are going to spend their time in Pyro, right? Right now, everybody's forced to be in Stanton together. So it kind of waters down the experience of getting pirated. But once the people who can't really hang in Stanton become pirates, they're probably going to be more comfortable chilling in Pyro. That might mean that skill floor of pirates in Stanton starts going up because the less people who are coming over with crime stats, the bounty hunters, like you said, they're going to be chomping because they're bored in Pyro.
Well, and another part of it too is like, how does CIG connect Stanton and Pyro? Because I know right away they probably won't particularly well, but how do you create a trade lane from Pyro to Stanton and Stanton to Pyro? How do you create a flow of players between those two systems? That's going to be very important. And I think now that we're talking about MMO stuff, like that's pretty important for an MMO, is to be able to go long distances and still feel like you're connected to the universe you left, or the place you just left. So will there be pirates in Stanton waiting for people to bring valuable stuff back from Pyro? Hopefully. Will there be people blockading, the Pyro Stanton jump point in some way? Hopefully. Hopefully there's some danger involved with that, within reason, obviously. How does CIG connect those two systems, Stanton and Pyro, in a meaningful economy kind of way,
Yeah.
And I think that creates a lot of like system to system gameplay rather than separating the two. Because I don't want to play two different games. I want to play one game with two systems.
It's encouraging that over the last year, I think since last March or something, we've seen the economy team every month saying that they're going through all the commodities, armor, weapons, missions in both Stanton and Pyro together to balance things out. So we know that they're not just developing Stanton's economy and then developing Pyro's economy. They're developing the overall economy and kind of siloing two segments of the game, which is an encouraging approach, in my opinion.
Yeah. And you want them to silo it because you want the experience to be unique, but you don't want them to completely separate them to the point where it feels like let's go to Stanton and do that gameplay today, well, let's go to Pyro and do that gameplay today. You want it to feel like you're playing one video game.
What do you think of Pyro so far from what we've played? We've gotten to jump in a couple times, CitizenCon last year and then Q1 this year.
I think there's some cool things they're doing with it. Obviously, the distances are going to be interesting. I think there's a lot more, at least in my experience, there was a lot more like heavier atmospheres in some of the places that we went. And the solar flares are really cool. That's a cool, unique thing that will surprise a lot of people when they first get into Pyro. I think it still has an issue with the mission system, meaning the missions still feel pretty samey. I mean, there's some unique missions, but a lot of the missions are still go here, kill 10 guys, leave, go here, disable 3 of the same thing, leave, which is, I mean, that's questing, that's missions, right? Creating a truly unique landscape, you're going to need the economy to be different. You're going to need the NPCs to be different. You're going to need the feel, like the atmosphere has to be different. And by atmosphere, I mean like the feeling of the game you're playing, it has to be different enough to be like, oh, I'm really in a different system. This is a new experience.
It's got to feel,
and right now
dangerous.
It's pretty the same. The stations are unique, but it's the same concept. There's ASOP terminals. You get in your ship, you fly to a place, you do a mission, you pick up some loot, you come back. The visuals
like
can only carry a game for so long. No, it doesn't feel like a reskin. I shouldn't say that. It does feel different, but it doesn't feel different enough yet for me. And I think there's probably going to be some people that balk at that, be like, oh, it's so different, and maybe they would say like, oh, your standards are too high. That's okay. I think it's okay that my standards are high. This is a $750 million, whatever it is, $700 million thing so far, and I think it's okay to have high standards.
Well, I think we should talk a little bit about the rest of 4.0, and then we'll move into kind of the talk about this becoming an MMO, because 4.0 itself is an update we've been waiting for a long time. Would you say that at this point, from what we've seen on the roadmap, that it is worthy of the name of 4.0 with all this anticipation and the step it kind of represents?
Yeah, I think so. As long as server meshing, Pyro, as long as they make it, typically like the big patches, like the X dot patches, so like 2.0, 3.0, whatever, 3.0 especially, have really, really, really felt like, oh, this is a huge step, right? Like we got on the elevator and we've arrived at another floor. We're not just like walking up the staircase. Yep. And I think with a thing like server meshing, that in the server meshing tests that we took part in, that felt so unique because all of a sudden it was like CIG was like, hey, we're going to put 800 people on this server real quick just to see what happens. And it sucked, but it also like functionally was kind of like working, it was all really, everything was really slow and delayed and everything. So there were problems with it, but like the fact that could be part of that of like, hey, we got server meshing working pretty well. So now you get to play in Stanton with 400 people or whatever, right? 250 people or something. That's going to be a big change. Mission system refactoring and transit system refactoring and all that stuff that they plan to put in. If they can chunk that into the game in a 4.0 patch, yeah, the game will absolutely feel, along with a new system. That's a big enough step to warrant it for sure.
I'm a little wishy-washy on it because 3.0, like it added the planetary tech, which was the big change, let us land on planets, and that kind of that parallel is, I guess, server meshing, letting us go to different systems. But 3.0 also was like kind of a big shift when it came to the way you would run missions and stuff, the way you would kind of look at the game, because now it was like a fundamental change. Planetary surfaces were like, it wasn't just more space like space stations already were. It was a completely different thing. And they're adding a lot of planets to Pyro, and we know they're unique and everything. But I do feel it's a little bit light on gameplay. I look at some of the things that they've been working on over the last few years: investigation missions, bounty hunting, hacking, refueling, refining, even like FPS scanning from CitizenCon. And I do wonder if that's the kind of stuff we'll see added in over the course of the next 3 months as we get closer, or if that's kind of post 4.0 stuff, in which case it is a bit of a bummer that we're not seeing any major new game profession. I guess engineering is there, which will be something.
Engineering's there, so that's it. First off, it's been so long since 3.0 that it's hard to wrap your head around what a X dot patch means today versus what it meant
8 years,
7
years ago,
7 years, whatever it was, a long time ago. It's very different. It's very difficult, I think, I think it's a little dangerous to compare the two because so much time has passed. But I also understand what you're saying. I think is an X dot patch worthy of being called an X dot patch by adding gameplay, or can you do it by adding core like mechanics, Right. I think the answer is yes to that, but at the same time, like I said, it's been so long since 3.0 that other people are going to have other opinions that are just as valid as that, I think.
I do definitely think it deserves the 4.0 name. Anything with server meshing in it is going to deserve it. But I'm really hoping that, because 3.23 feels like a primer for 4.0. It feels like the first half of kind of what 3.0 was. We got the star map, the HUD, the interaction system, all that with 3.0. This I'm hoping they can do something that just drives forward a distinct change in the way we're playing, whether it's by reintroducing mission givers finally, giving us another shot at some narrative missions, or making doubling down and diving hard into reputation hostilities so that we actually can feel a tangible difference when we're getting into the game, running into NPCs in the verse, seeing them in space stations, right? Like those kinds of things actually change your overall experience as opposed to just introducing new locations and new types of missions. Yeah. And I hope that they introduce something like that over the next quarter.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing too, is right now we get almost all of our missions from your Mobi-Glass. It's like the same thing over and over and over and over and over. It doesn't matter where you are, you're going to get a mission from Mobi-Glass if you want it. Mission givers is a big one for me that I think maybe this is a nitpick. I don't know, but to some people it probably will be. But in an MMO, it's really nice to be able to go to a bounty board. Go to a system. Nobody. I shouldn't say nobody, but when I wake up at Area 18 or wherever I wake up, I do my thing there. I leave, and unless I absolutely have to, I never come back. If I'm trading or whatever, whatever it might be, I might come back to buy a ship, right? But I don't come back to live there. I never see my hab again. And the reason is because I set my spawn at Evers Harbor immediately, or I set my spawn at Bajini Point immediately. I never come back. And how does CIG create a space where it is worth it? Not forcing you, because forcing you just makes things boring. Forcing you make things tedious and frustrating and everything else. How do they make it worth your while to come back to a city and do some business there. And I think mission givers is a good one, high value mission givers of some kind. So a good example of this is like at Hurston on Loreville, you can meet up with I always forget his name, Miles Eckhart.
Yeah.
And you meet up with him like twice during his mission chain. You meet him at the bar. And I think it'd be cool if there was stuff like that, where it was like more of a story, Twitch Pacheco, you meet her at Area 18 once, and then forevermore you get her missions through your Moby Glass, right?
Yeah.
Which is not the end of the world. I understand they're trying to save people time and like, testing the missions and doing the missions and stuff. But going back to be like, hey, there's a high value bounty that's going to pay 100K. And it's like an NPC, could be AI, right? This is like, I think New World has this. Is it New World that I'm thinking of? I don't remember. I feel like Cyberpunk might have had it too. I can't remember. But you can get missions from things like that, like a place you go where it's like, here's a quest for you, go do the thing.
I've gotten that in some games.
Yeah, tons of MMOs have stuff like that. And it's kind of cool to have like a central place that you see other players coming and going from. Like the ASOP terminals is a great place where players meet up. The ship stores, if you're at Loreville and you go to the ship store, you wait 5 minutes, you'll probably see a player come through. And that just kind of adds to the life of the game. So having a place that's close to the ASOP terminals, or that's close to like, somewhat close to that area where players are going to come and go from, just creating little hubs of activity where you're going to see players running around. I think it's kind of a cool thing to turning it into an MMO. And then you just need more players, in more places like that. So
that's also, going a step past that and just talking about general game, group gameplay, whether it's called org tools, permissions, or whatever you need to call it, being able to share missions with each other, like making missions for other players. If that were added in 4.0, that would be a kind of change I'd talk about. If you could suddenly say, I have a bunch of minerals in this bag and I need to make a buy and sell mission that tasks a player to come and pick them up for me and sell them at a location, and you can put that out in the verse, get a certain reputation person, they come and pick it up and sell it at a place, and that money gets sent to you. You see that show up 30 minutes later. That is a huge change to the game and how the flow could work.
Yeah. And I think maybe this is going to be controversial, maybe not. I feel like it has been in the past. I'm a person, I'm totally cool with auction house gameplay. I think players should be able to have a game-driven mechanic place system that allows me, like a player marketplace in the game, to be able to, like, I found a cool like skinned P6LR sniper rifle, and I'm gonna sell that here at like Area 18, and another player is gonna come to Area 18 and check out their auction house. I mean, auction house is just the colloquial term, but that terminal or that place or whatever, people congregate there, people come and go. Like, to me, that's a really one of the most used parts of MMOs is the auction house mentality of like players can buy and sell items, set their prices, and it automatically creates an economy, like a player economy, where P6LRs are worth a lot. So it's time to sell my P6LR that I had in storage. It just makes sense. And I think that's a cool part of like that they could go towards for an MMO. I don't know if they ever will, in favor of what they have now, where it's like you meet up and it's kind of scary and sketchy. And every trade that you make with another player right now feels like this kind of like black market trade, where it's like you talk in global chat. Yeah.
Craigslist 2005.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like a Craigslist thing. And it'd be kind of cool if they created eBay, where it was like, this is a marketplace that players can use, and the game helps you with that,
Yeah.
And gets you paid. So I think that's a big step to creating economy. I think when games try to lock down their economy too much, it's really boring. You have to give the players some control over that economy, even with the issues that come along with it. Like sometimes players will crash the economy for a certain thing, or big orgs will mess around with it. It happens in every MMO that has that auction house, mechanic. But I think that those things create some drama, they create some hype, they create excitement. To me, those are like short term, they're frustrating when sometimes that stuff happens. Long term, I think they're good for the game.
Could work out.
I don't know.
And those are the kinds of things that I'm hoping we see. economy update. That would be huge to get to see an update to like the beacon system or something, organization system, like these things that I think, as you've talked about more in our last episode, but even today a little bit, things that push it a little more towards that MMO vibe of like universal interaction. We're getting expanded so that a lot more people are going to be in a place together. We're going to start running into characters more. Those kinds of systems are the kinds of things I would expect to see in 4.0, or maybe more likely 4.1 to support
like
those
a
higher
4.x patch.
Yeah.
Because I think 4.0 is going to be, they want it to be, it looks like they want it to be a mechanics patch. So I mean, server meshing, they want it to be a framework patch, which is good. I mean, that's fine by me. But the question with CIG and with Star Citizen is always, if we're building a foundation, you can make that foundation miles and miles wide. What are you going to put on top of it? What are you going to put up there to build the game on top of that foundation? And hopefully that comes after the 4.0 foundation patch with like server meshing and some of these other things, engineering and charge drain and, everything else. And it's like, okay, where's the mission system going? Let's hear about that. Where's the economy system going? Where's this quanta thing that we've heard so much about over the years? What's the story there? And before we start talking about 1.0, I think the 1.0 conversation, I had to touch on it for a second. Over the last 2-3 months or whatever, people have lost their minds about like somebody mentioned 1.0, and it's like, I kind of laugh at that because I'm like, if 1.0 looks anything like the current game does, we're not playing this game very long. You know what I mean? And I don't mean to be like the bearer of bad news, but that's the truth. And some people will play it forever. Some people are lifers, but I think they want to make 1.0 a lot more than it is. So to talk about 1.0 within the context of the game we have right now is kind of laughable to me. Because I really hope that 1.0 is nothing like the game we play right now.
Speaking of the game we play right now.
Yes.
There have been some recent changes going on. We're going to get back to 4.0 and the MMO overall, but this is kind of pertinent to the conversation. There are a lot of game design things that go into making the game unique. We talked about this a little bit before the show. But things like the respawn system, logging out with or without beds, player skill system, even master modes, these are things that are fundamentally changing the way systems in the game work.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the way that they have been changing stuff? Do you think that there is the possibility that things will become a little bit more simplified than the MMO people were waiting for?
Yeah, the weird thing about MMOs is like, sometimes it's good to be simple in an MMO because you do want your players to understand your game. Because if you want your players to play your game for hundreds of hours, I don't think every one of those 100 hours should be like, I'm frustrated learning a new thing. I'm frustrated learning a new thing. I'm frustrated learning a new thing. There has to be things that are like intuitive that you pick up really quickly. I bring up Elite Dangerous a lot because I think it has a lot of good mechanics in it. Elite Dangerous has an interesting system with like mining. When you go mining in Elite Dangerous, you can go mining anywhere, pretty much anywhere. You find a ring, you find a rock, you shoot it with a mining laser, some stuff pops out. Sometimes it's useless. As you deepen your gameplay into mining, you start to learn about things like deep core mining. You start to learn about things like the metal rings, like pristine metallic rings and stuff like that around some planets. You start to learn how to be a better miner. Another good example, and this isn't an MMO, but Helldivers. In Helldivers, the tutorial is like 10 minutes. That teaches you 75% of what you need to play the game. And you can do that. You can play the game on low difficulty missions and just kind of goof off and have fun and just play the game. Or you can start to deepen your experience and go to a lot more harder stuff, more difficult enemies. You start to unlock stronger weaponry. But easy to learn, hard to master is a phrase that is very difficult for game developers to work within. That's a very difficult target to hit for game developers. Easy to learn, hard to master. you want your players to have fun from the get-go. You don't want it to be a frustrating experience learning how to get to your freaking spaceship. But you also want your players to feel like they can spend a few hundred hours learning some very unique and very in-depth systems to get the most out of their game. And that's going to be a challenge for CIG going forward. Right now, it's kind of, you wake up and everything's confusing, and then you die. Until you put, like, when people ask me on stream sometimes, they're like, how do I become a better pilot? And I'm like, usually you just die over and over. You're just bad at it until you start to get better at it. I mean, there's ways you can learn, but like, the game doesn't do a very good job of teaching you anything.
Yeah.
And MMOs do a good job of teaching you things. In World of Warcraft, your first mission is kill 10 rats or whatever, right? Like, it's go here, click this guy. You have tooltips that help you out, and you get like one fireball spell or whatever, like as a mage. And then as you level up and progress, you start to get more stuff, and you put them all together, and you learn from other players, and you learn from, doing raids or doing other kinds of missions and quests, and crafting and all these kinds of things that you learn because the game kind of, it feeds you the base and then lets you expand on it, and learn from it. And CIG's not there yet with Star Citizen, which
nowhere near.
I think that's something that brings it towards MMO status. Yeah,
it's really lacking there. Excuse me. It is really lacking there in the sense that not only do you need missions to teach you how to do the stuff that's expected sandbox wise, but you need those starting missions, like you said, to teach you how those missions work. And we have none of that. Like, when somebody jumps into Star Citizen and asks what to do, they'll get a different answer from everyone.
Because, if you ask global chat, hey, I'm a new player, what should I do first?
Yeah.
You'll get people telling you everything.
Like, how do I get the best new player experience? Well, I would say do cargo box missions, but those are broken. So maybe do mercenary missions, but those just kind of throw you into it. There's no like beginner version. Yeah. You could do bounty missions, but that's a hit, or maybe the ship will spawn. Like, it's hard to find the flow of what Star Citizen's general day-to-day gameplay is supposed to be, besides just kind of doing whatever you feel like.
And there's a question for a question almost every time. Somebody, what's the first thing I should do? Well, wake up, make your way to your ship. Okay, how do I do that? There's some signage probably that you might be able to check. How do I get to my, like, how do I call my ship? Okay, there's these terminals. You have to explain every little thing. And there is a new player. Some people, I can feel the YouTube comments, new player guide. There is a new player guide. There is like a tutorial mission or whatever. I think the tutorial mission has recently been breaking people's accounts. I don't think it does that anymore, but it's like, you can never trust I never do the tutorial mission, even in the PTU, because I'm just like, I don't want to waste my time, like, breaking my own game by doing this. Like, the tutorial needs to be a part of your game experience. That's the whole point. In WoW, the tutorial is your first mission, which is like a guy telling you to go kill rats on his farm or something. And it's just part of the game. It's not like, would you like to do the tutorial mission or would you like to skip it? And it's like, well, what's the difference? Do I get some bonus for doing the tutorial mission? Is there some, It's like, your bonus is having to do a character repair.
It should be half the time. It should be like, you wake up in your city, your ship is slightly damaged, so the game has you go buy some supplies, load them in your ship, fix your ship, fly up to the station, change your spawn. Like, that.
Or like, even something like, tutorial mission pops up. It's the first thing that happens. Like, hey, we've got this, broken down Aurora MR, right? That you can have if you just fix it up, right? So it's like missing part of a wing. It doesn't fly particularly well. That teaches a player that when your ship, like, the first thing you learn is you get into a ship, there's that ships fly differently when they're damaged. Like, that's a cool teaching moment from a video game, right? You don't have to learn that the first time your ship gets damaged. You learn that by doing the entry mission in the game.
Yeah.
And so they tell you, like, hey, our repair services are kind of overloaded here. We want you to go up to like Everest Harbor and get some repairs there. We think you can make it there. You just have to limp the ship there. So that it tells a little bit of a story. It teaches you a little bit about the game. It allows you to interact with several things all at once. It's pretty cool. I mean, that's a great idea, actually.
And I feel like that's kind of where they're moving. 323 did a good job of helping with that kind of stuff. Tooltips have gotten a lot better. The mini map is going to help players a lot more. And when we do get the SPS scanning feature, you'll be able to just ping things and see directions probably in pop-ups. So they're definitely moving in that direction. You can tell CIG feels this pressure, but it would be great if this was in a better place for 4.0.
Yeah. And maybe it will be. I mean, we have months, right? We're it's not like 4.0 is coming next month. We just got 3.23.
Yeah. No, we're past that now. We're over it. Going back though to the original question about these design changes that are kind of starting to pop up. How are you feeling about them? Let's because we were talking about it before the show. Let's talk about the NERSA and kind of the way that they're talking about respawning with Star Citizen now. You feel like they're sending the right message for the MMO they want to be? Are they communicating a different kind of MMO? Like, what are you getting from this?
So I think they can keep their vision intact with some of the, so a little context here. During this time frame of recording, just the other day, like 2 days ago, they came out with an commercial, an ad for the NERSA, which is an Ursa medical, and they also made a change a few days ago. Talked about the change in 321.1, where you can respawn on, I think, any medical bed on any ship. So we're talking tier 3, tier 2, tier 1s. It was tier 1s only you could respawn on, I think. And you just heal on tier 2 and tier 3s. They made that change, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, something like that.
A couple years ago.
And they said, we want to make things more hardcore. And now they're saying, we want to make things less hardcore. I don't know exactly how that's going to work. And then there's a lot more layering on top of that. So it's not me. I'm not talking crap on CIG, so to speak, with this. It's just weird messaging. So that's kind of the space we're in while we're recording this right now, is that it's just kind of we're in this weird messaging space with this.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are taking that, especially this recent change, and being like, they're dumbing down the medical experience. They're making it so you can respawn. I don't think that is necessarily the case. I think that they are making changes that will make more sense with future changes. I think that in the short term, it looks that way. And that's frustrating for a lot of players, myself included. Especially when you have, and for those of you who don't know, you can go look at the Ursa Medical advertisement. You'll probably see what I'm saying. Pause the video, go check that video, come back here, you'll understand. It's without too many spoilers, I guess. That video has very strange messaging when it comes to what a ground-based medical vehicle has always thought to mean for players in CIG and some of the messaging they've given before. So it just seems, the best phrase that I've heard about it is a little tone deaf, maybe. It just seems like a very strange way to put that vehicle out there. That being said, some of the changes, can it create more of an MMO experience? Yeah. I think given some layering, I think it created an MMO experience where it feels like you're telling a story, you know? One thing that kind of sucks is going to a place, spending a lot of time getting there, and then dying, and then going all the way back, respawning, having to restart. There is something kind of cool and MMO-y about going to a place, bringing the tools to keep you there, dying, and then respawning a couple of kilometers away and getting to continue on, you know? That's kind of cool. I kind of like that. I do think that it needs to come with more systems and mechanics on top of it to make it fair, make it unique, make it have depth, make it have consequences of its own, that kind of thing. But I think on the surface, or I guess on the base level, that could be a good thing that pushes it in the right direction. For example,
they definitely have to limit it to some extent with the smaller vehicles, because you're looking at ships like the Endeavor or the Apollo that are supposed to be just kind of these clinics floating in space where people are respawning, right? Like, the whole point of the ship is you're supposed to be just kind of floating around near places and being like, hey, I'm offering public respawns. It'll be interesting to see how that works with smaller ships getting that possibility.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting. And I think they can accomplish that too. So the layering that I talked about, for example, if you want to respawn on a C8R Pisces Rescue, it's like this med bed comes with enough green goo, you know, to respawn 2 people, 3 people, whatever.
Yeah.
So you only get a certain number of respawns before you have to like take that ship somewhere and go fill it back up, you know? There's no reason why that couldn't be used to balance everything. And another good one that I heard was like, okay, if you have a tier 3 med bed and you choose to respawn on it, it doesn't heal any of your tier 2 or tier 1 injuries. It only heals tier 3 injuries. So you might wake up on your medical bed with like a tier 2 chest injury that you still have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's kind of a cool balancing thing. It creates something we talked about before the podcast started. Tomato was like creating a blueprint for how your game is going to play is a big part of an MMO. Players in MMOs understand how they're going to respawn if they die. They understand what's going to happen to them if they do a certain thing, right? There's blueprints for a lot of your gameplay in MMOs. And understanding those blueprints is a big part of the depth of the MMO. And so if I can say, I have a C8R Pisces, I'm at this bunker, if I get a tier 1 arm injury, I won't be able to fly my ship. If I choose to respawn and do backspace and respawn at my C8R, that injury won't be healed. It's not going to help me. I have to solve my problem in another way. And I think that creates some depth there, you know, that creates a blueprint for depth, which might be fine. That might be fine. Yeah, so, as long as they do it right.
Hot take then. Do you think that this is a change they're making because they do have some big plans for medical getting more complicated like that? Or do you think this is a change they're making purely to make logging on and off easier in order to encourage players to play more?
I think it's a little column A, a little column B. Personally, I mean, I know they want depth with a lot of things and they want things to be fair. They don't want things to be cheesed and stuff like that. And that's a big challenge for COG because people always find ways to cheese things and get the most out of their game. So I think they do want to make it like it's okay for your MMO to be. You don't want your MMO to be painful. Yeah, like you don't want. Yeah, like even like World of Warcraft, dying was not horrible. You know, it's like you run back from a graveyard, right? So you don't want your game to be painful, but you do want it to be complex. Like there's a difference between complicated and complex.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between painful and meaningful. So you want your gameplay to be meaningful, but not painful. You want your gameplay to be complex, but not complicated. Or not too complicated, I should say. And I think that this gives them the tools to add complexity without overcomplicating it. As long as it makes sense, you know, like you learn one time that, and there could be a tutorial mission for something like that. I mean, this is just like, you know, theory crafting, whatever, but like it could be a tutorial mission where it's like, hey, well, like Helldivers is a good example. Like they teach you how to heal your injury by injuring you. For those of you who played Helldivers, yeah, it's like you walk up to a thing and you push a button and it stabs you in the chest and you start bleeding. And then he goes, use your med pen or whatever. And that's kind of a cool like mechanic. It teaches you the game teaches you right away. Like this is what happens when you here's the blueprint for what happens when you get injured. Here's how that's going to work. Here's how bleed out's going to work. Here's how to fix that. And if CIG can create, can use this gameplay to create systems that teach you what happens if you get a tier 1 leg injury, what happens if you get a tier 2 injury, if you get a tier 3 injury, things are a little less complicated. Here's how to fix that.
Yeah.
Severity versus complicatedness versus complexity versus depth, all those things are in flux and in balance. So I think the more you have to play with, the better off you are in that situation. So this is one of those classic examples of if CIG does it right, they can use it to their advantage in making the game. I just hope they do it right instead of just throwing it out there and being like, you can respawn at tier 3s now, and then 2 years later, nothing is different, I
really, really hope this isn't a sign of respawning becoming a thing in the final design. For now, yes, it makes sense as a temporary thing, but I hope this doesn't point towards death becoming a less impactful thing. I think that whole feeling of things mattering more when you make a decision, and I understand they want us to get more into combat. They want us to play more, and like if you're getting into combat and you're terrified every time you do that you're going to take a bullet that ends that life that you have to do all this stuff for, that you lose your equipment and you lose one of your 7 lives and all that stuff. I get that, but
Yeah.
at the same time, that is part of what makes this game so intriguing.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's there's a lot that's in flux. So I've seen in a couple of Discords, community manager Jake Acapella has been going around kind of saying like, hey, just so you guys know, like the plan for Death of a Spaceman isn't changing. We still want Death of a Spaceman to come in. We want it to be impactful. We want it to be meaningful. There's been a few different CIG devs at this point that have kind of parroted that same thing of like, we still have a plan for Death of a Spaceman. We still want it to be, a meaningful thing if you die or if you die several times. I do think that 2 things. The first thing is, I'll say it really quickly, because it's kind of it's a touchy topic, but the timing of this change was poor. I don't think it was intentional. Somebody's going to think it's intentional, but it's like, whatever. There's, even if you thought that, there's no way to prove it. So whatever. But the timing is poor. Making a change to medical, like you can respawn at tier 3 med beds. By the way, we're selling a tier 3 med bed. It's like, maybe you guys should have thought that one through. Maybe convenience, I don't know, whatever, maybe marketing, but
everybody's doing that, man.
Yeah, everybody's going to say their own stuff about that. At the end of the day, it just is what it is. For me, It's just bad timing. It doesn't look that great. And then to put out a video like they did with the Nursa, where it's like, some guy's respawning 1,000 times at the Ursa. It's like, your messaging is not great right now. You need to look at how your community sees this in the scope of Death of a Space. You need to do that before you do this stuff. So I think that was not, I think I think holding CIG accountable for stuff like that is important. It's very easy for, like, because CIG is just made up of a bunch of people, right? They're just people. They're excited about their game and they're excited about what they're building.
Yep. And
they want us to be excited. That being said, it's okay to hold them accountable when that excitement goes into, all right, like you got to look at your timing, you got to look at your messaging, you got to look at what this says to the community, because your community is incredibly important to you, and you have to take, even if it's an accident, you have to take that into account. You have to take that timing and that messaging into account when you're doing these things and how they come out. But
it's also like these things are planned out very far in advance by different teams on different timetables, and it just, like, the conversation surrounding all of this stuff has changed now than it was when they probably planned this trailer, which was maybe 6 months ago, 8 months ago. Yeah. So like, now they're stepping into it more because there are other things that have started to change in the game. Master modes has gotten people talking a little bit more about like the long-term design decisions. Bed logging has become a little bit of a topic over the last couple of weeks. This ends up coming up at a time when I think people really want to discuss the direction the game is going in, especially now we see these guys came on to Star Citizen Live, talked a little bit about this stuff. Richard Tyrer came out and he's like, hey, I'm here to make some changes and get things going. People will start to draw lines. And so CIG's communication during that time is, I think, pretty important for helping to keep those things in line. And the devs shouldn't have to go around and be like, yeah, Death of a Spaceman's still a thing. Why haven't we talked about medical in such a long time? Yeah.
It's a many headed beast. This game is, because there's a section of your community that's super excited about medical gameplay. There's a totally different section of your community that's super excited about mining. And how do you make all those people excited and happy and interested? And it's a challenge because you can only talk about so many things at once, and you have this release schedule of things that you're working on.
Yep.
And how do you fix all those gameplay loops? How do you balance all those gameplay loops?
Yeah, making medical
it's
players
be a challenge for sure.
Making medical players and FPS players both happy is going to be difficult because
for sure.
To do one, you have to take some concessions in the other. So
your concessions, or just keep it in mind from a design standpoint. Of like, so here's an example, right? If I have a medical Ursa, which presumably its target range is going to be like 2 kilometers, whatever an Ursa is, like a kilometer, 2 kilometers. If I park that 2.5 kilometers away from Jumptown, or 3 kilometers away from Jumptown, and I have some gear stashed, in it nearby, whatever. So if I assault Jumptown and die, I can just be a couple kilometers. You know what I mean? Like, how close can I be and just keep respawning? Or even like roll up right next to Jumptown and just keep respawning in the same medical Ursa? That's a question that CIG has to answer, because they made this gameplay. They made Jumptown. They made Xenothreat. They made all these different types of gameplay. And it's going to impact the way that players interact with one another. I don't care as much about how players interact with the AI or the NPCs or the game space. That's pretty easy to develop for, I think. How are players going to use this with and against one another is a question that is going to get a lot of people up in arms about changes like this. And you have to answer those questions for your player base.
And that's what makes it unique as an MMO going into this.
Yeah, for sure.
I got a call to prayer in the background. I'm sure you guys are used to it by now. So I want to get your consensus on 4.0 before this last question. As a patch, is it good? Is it interesting? Does it feel like it is a step in the right direction for MMO, Star Citizen, and just Star Citizen game overall?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. To me, server meshing is a big part of it, but the biggest part, just on a surface level, is how are they going to connect Stanton and Pyro? Because that tells us a little bit about how they're going to connect Pyro and Nyx, or Pyro and Odin, or Stanton and Nyx, and whatever. I'd like to see their plan for how they're going to connect their systems to create spaces where hundreds, thousands of players are going to interact. Server meshing is a big part of that. Creating a space where hundreds of players can kind of come and go between different places and interact, especially dynamic server meshing. The quasi-grazer, for instance, couldn't care less. I mean, it's kind of cool, but that doesn't make it an MMO. You know what I mean? Like,
come on, man. Space cows are fishing, and space cows is really all you need.
But for me, it's the how is this game going to usher me through it in a space where the ocean gets wider and wider? How am I going to traverse that ocean? So, and we just haven't heard much about that yet, about how CIG is really going to connect Stanton and Pyro. So I'm excited to hear about that. That's the thing that I'm most excited about. I think that is what, to me, is what the game hinges on the most, to me, is how they, yay, Pyro's out. Okay, now what? What do we do with it? Do we go there and do missions the same as Stanton? Or is there some cool interaction between Stanton and Pyro where we can create a lot of gameplay and a lot of mechanics that players start to feel like this is an ocean that they're swimming in, or that they're moving through. So, yeah. Because like you can go, living life, you can go on vacation to another continent. But a big question is like, how do I get there? What are the differences? What's different about, going to South America or going to the UK, versus being in the United States or whatever, right? What are the interactions between those two places that keep everything interesting? Why do people travel? Because the other place is very different and unique, and they want to go there and they want to see it and they want to experience it. And how is the experience different? So a lot of those questions are just unanswered, and those are the biggest questions that I have.
Yeah, that's fair. Really understanding how this expands to different star systems, and we talked about it during this show, how those different star systems will actually make you feel like you're playing in a different environment. Yeah, that's got to be. They've got to differentiate between planet and planet. They've got to go hard between system and system. Yeah, for sure. You want to feel like you're in a foreign place, isn't maybe the right word, but you want to feel like you're in a place that is going to give you a fresh experience. A lot of MMOs do this by level. Certain areas are like level 1 to 10, and then the next area is like a level 11 to 19, and then 20 to, you know what I mean? Yeah. CIG can't really do that, which is fine. But a lot of those games end up being like, I made it to the end game, and I'm still up. Like I just started a minute ago. Yeah.
So how does CIG create a space where you can go places that are scary, but if you spend time and prepare, you're ready for it, you know.
Yeah. Like anybody can do it.
That's yeah, like anybody can do it, but if you wake up and your buddy brings you to Pyro, for instance, you're terrified, and or something like that, and it's like, how does it create a space where you level up without really leveling up?
Yeah, I get what you mean. To finish off today, I want to ask, what do you hope will be the focal point, the focus of Star Citizen's development in general going forward after server meshing? We've been waiting for it for 7 years. Finally, we're getting it with 4.0. What would you like to see them start to shift more towards?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
What do you want them to focus on as their kind of main goal, their main selling point of where they're headed after server meshing and 4.0 come out?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Well, okay, so personally, like, and not everybody's going to share this belief, but I think I'd like to see conversation about more star systems being developed. I think it'd be very cool to see the ideas that they have for like Nyx and Odin and see some progress on that. Personally, I'm sick of hype around new spaceships. I want hype around new places. I want hype around new missions. I want hype around new mechanics. I want hype around things that aren't like, hey, there's another thing that I can get in and fly to a place and do a thing. Like, great, there's lots of spaceships. My hype cup is dry for spaceships. So for me, it becomes like we talked about a minute ago, like post 4.0. How do we create depth between systems? What's next? How are we making this ocean wider? While keeping the depth,
Yeah,
I think that's pretty important to me. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to, is like, I want to see CIG's plan for Nyx or Odin or whatever it might be. And people are going to say, well, that's, wishful thinking and whatever, but it's like, well, we've been pretty content dry for like 4 years, and they're moving a lot of staff back to the PU. They have, at least. I think it's okay to keep our standards high. I think it's okay to keep our standards up, as far as we've been waiting a long time.
Yeah.
We put a lot of money into this thing. And all signs point to, hopefully, the development is increasing. And so it's okay for us to raise our standards from the incredibly low standards that we've had for the last like 4 years of the development speed.
There are some very obvious topics I think should be dominating the conversation after this year. Base building, definitely. Like you said, new star systems, like however they're expanding there, should be huge. Crafting, supply and demand, like these are things that are actually going to make the game the kind of MMO you're talking about.
Yep.
Those are those later stage.
Real economy stuff. Like you said, crafting. Personally, I think a player economy of some like auction house style stuff would be really cool. Like some of the mechanics that some of the good mechanics that make an MMO feel like an MMO. Like, you don't have to reinvent those wheels. You can put them in your game. People will like them because people almost universally like them. There's always going to be somebody that doesn't like an auction house or whatever, but if it makes your game feel like a video, like an MMO game, it's okay to put that in your game. You don't have to create something new with everything. You can use some of those classic designs.
I hope square wheel,
CIG starts leaning into that. What'd you say?
I said I do like a square wheel every once in a while.
Every once in a while, yeah.
Whip it out, see how it runs. Xerostate, thank you so much for joining me for this talk,
Absolutely.
man. It's the first one we did was good fun. This one, with the added context of 4.0, just gave us a lot more, I think, specifics to talk about.
But wait.
Yes.
We have to talk about base building. We said we were going to talk about base building. You have a couple minutes, or are we out of time?
Yeah. No, we could do a couple minutes. Base building. Because
I know we were going to have a DM after this, but like, we forgot to talk about base building.
We did that last time. No, base building. Yeah, that's, as far as MMOs go, that's a lot of people's end game, right? They want to just get somewhere and build something and live there. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's that simple enough, or do they need to have a twist to base building in Star Citizen?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot they can develop with it. As far as like what happens when you interact with another player's base, what's is it like Rust where you can just destroy it, or is it more like, hey, cool, there's another player's base over there, like in Elite Dangerous. Elite Dangerous, there are mega like carriers they're called, which is kind of like a mobile station that a player owns, and they can move those from system to system, and other players can interact with them, buy and sell, get repairs, get fuel, all that kind of stuff. And you can close them open. You have some control over them. So it's like, how is CIG going to do the bases? They talked a little bit about space stations, even like building a station in space. Are you going to be able to like broadcast that as a quantumable location? Turn that on and off. That'd be kind of cool. How's that going to work in high sec, low sec, null sec? So I think there's a lot that they can play with there, and I really hope that CIG leans into it. Personally,
that could also be a huge catalyst for the economy.
Oh yeah,
crafting,
for sure.
Obviously, getting stuff, but like needing a lot of supplies transported places for base building. I do hope that they can come up with enough reasons for people to want to have bases and have bases in different spots too. Not just one right outside the city you call home, but have one in each star system.
Yeah. Well, and you don't want your base to feel like it's just a visual thing, because what's the point? What did we spend months or years developing this on if the players aren't going to get anything like gameplay related out of it? So if you're going to do bases, I think you have to do what Elite Dangerous did and you have to make it so that player can interact with other players using it. You have to allow other players to see it, and you have to allow that player some control over it and a meaningful set of gameplay with a base. A place that you can log out safely, a place that you can put a med bed of your own and heal your own injuries, a place that you can stock up with stuff, a place that you can trade with other players potentially, that you can refuel your ships or refuel other players' ships. I think there's a lot that they can do with those. And like I said, I really hope, because it's a unique system. There's not a lot of MMOs like World of Warcraft or New World that allow you to build a home and share that home with other players and have impactful, meaningful gameplay at those places, sandbox style gameplay at those places. I think that it creates a space where you have something that very few other games have, and it furthers the MMO feeling, of like, I have a place that I've built that other players want to come and visit, or other players do come and visit, that I call home. Yep. And I think that's really cool. And it also takes some of the pressure off of CIG. They don't have to build stations anymore in a lot of systems because players are going to build their own stations here. We don't have to do that work. We're going to give the players the tools to do that work for us, so we can continue to build the game rather than, well, here's another Lagrange point. Here's another, Bajini point style station. Here's another whatever. This is a place that you can call home. No, they give us the tools to build our own home. And then we just go do that. Like, give the power to the players, take some of that pressure off of yourself as a developer so that you can create the underlying systems that keep letting us do that. Because we want to take the pressure off CIG. We want to play the game for ourselves. We don't want to be our hands being held through every part of the game,
I'm sure them letting us build space stations would take pressure off rather than add it on. Oh, I'm sure.
Well,
we wouldn't break
what I mean. In the short term, you're talking about like CIG creating the systems for us to create stations, right? But if you build that ability for us to create stations, and obviously you have rules and stuff like that around it, a player's going to create a station, and then they're going to call that home, and it takes some of the pressure off of you from having to build, like, we have to make the Kuro one, ambitious dream station perfect. Yeah, because a lot of players are going to come and go from here. A lot of players are going to come and go from their own stations, and we can just keep building the spaces for them to do that in, So I hope that that's kind of the direction they take with that, but it's up in the ether. So who knows?
I hope so, man. That underground facilities, caves, building interiors. We have so many like major things that are post 4.0 discussions, I guess, that we still need to see development on what they're going to do for the game, because there's a lot going on, and what we're seeing with the 4.0 roadmap roundup is just a slice of it. I mean, it's good stuff, but it's definitely not the whole of what they've been working on. So,
well, one of the biggest complaints in Pyro is the travel times from stations to planets and stuff. So solve your problem. Let players create space stations near Pyro 4, right, or Pyro 5,
They'll get attacked all the time.
Well, that's fine, but like you don't have to broadcast the beacon. You know what I mean? Or what? Unless you were just kind of like throwing ideas out there, but
Yeah.
you know, let your players create spaces where they don't have to sit in quantum travel for 20 minutes to go do a mission. Why not? You know, like I said, take some of the pressure off of yourself as a developer. Long term.
We will see how it goes. It's an exciting time for the development for sure.
For sure.
Thank you, man, for sticking around for some base building talk. Let people know where they can find your content.
Mostly on Twitch. I stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/Xerostate. And I do have a YouTube channel. I don't post there very often. I wish I did, but life. So mostly Twitch. And I post dumb stuff on Twitter from time to time. So you can
good conversation,
find me there and say hello.
Ugly tweets. I like it. It's great Star Citizen fodder.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for joining me, dude. Appreciate you.
Absolutely, my man.
Thank you all. Yeah, man. It's always a good time. Thank you all for joining for this talk. Glad we got to get through this one without technical problems. If you do like this podcast, make sure to check out the rest of it on Space Tomato 2 or on any audio platforms. We do this every single week, talking about Star Citizen or space games in general with different guests from around the community. But we also do Citizen Central, which is a four guest, a single four, not 44, a 4-guest podcast we do every month talking about bigger topics. So keep an eye out on Space Tomato 2 for more of that. Thank you once again, Xerostate, for joining me. And to all of you lovely folks out there, I will see you next week.